think you know Adolf Hitler. You've never seen him like this before. Hitler's contemporaries, from his birth in Braunau to his death in the bunker, authentically flesh out the picture. Who was Hitler? Hitler neither finished school nor had any vocational training. He occasionally lived in homeless shelters or on the street. He refused to pursue a regular job. To this day, it seems inexplicable that he could come to power. Out of nowhere, Hitler became the Führer, leader of the German Reich, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century, starting an inferno that engulfed the world and brought death to millions of people. The nation worshipped him and followed him blindly into the abyss. But during his lifetime, he kept his origins and his life secret. No one should know how or who he was. Fascinating and oppressive accounts from companions, friends, and enemies, as well as the most extensive collection of archive material ever shown, much of it hitherto unpublished, reveal who Hitler was and how he could become what he was: a notorious liar and an unscrupulous murderer. Social elites convince Reich President Hindenburg to appoint Hitler Reich Chancellor, as they anticipate using the Nazis to get rid of the communists. They also believe that they can control Hitler, as he needs the conservative parties to form a coalition. But through a combination of lies and undisguised aggression, Hitler first gets rid of his political opponents and then those who brought him to power. But to obtain sole power, Hitler still has to eliminate those leaders within the NSDAP itself who could pose a danger to him. At that time, the most powerful person in the party besides Hitler is Ernst Roehm, leader of the 4 million man SA. What will Hitler do?
January the 1st, 1933. Hitler was in a good mood that evening and talkative, like in the old days. Before he left, he added to his entry in the guest book,
"On the first day of the new year."
Then he looked at me and said, with suppressed excitement,
"This year belongs to us."
Ernst Hanfstaengl, head of the NSDAP Foreign Press Bureau.
The party had overshot its peak and was immensely in debt. According to Otto Strasser, it was some 11 million marks. Theodor Duesterberg, leader of the Stahlhelm Soldiers Association.
After Hindenburg had decided against Chancellor Brüning, the president turned his attention to the forces of the great agrarian heavy industry coalition that operated with Hitler against Brüning, his natural allies. He took their view of Hitler. The reconstruction and further expansion of the great agrarian and heavy industry positions of power was to be taken forward. But the power was not to be transferred to the National Socialism. Ernst Niekisch, journalist, National Bolshevist.
Diary, Monday, January the 30th, 1933. Elsa came back from school with the cry, "Heil Hitler!" Then we knew Hitler had become German Chancellor, at last. Henrietta Schneider, housekeeper, East Prussia.
On January the 30th, 1933, Hindenburg appointed Hitler Chancellor. Meissner, Hindenburg's Secretary of State, and Papen, his confidential advisor, persuaded the old man that the crowning glory of his life work would be a unified, well-ordered Reich with military strength. He believed them. Erich Kochweser, liberal German politician in exile in Brasilia.
Letter of appointment. In the name of the Reich, I appoint Herr Adolf Hitler to be German Chancellor. Berlin, January the 30th, 1933. President von Hindenburg.
Letter to Paul von Hindenburg. When the history of the German people is finally written, then the end of the Reich presidency will be described as the darkest day in German history. Erich Ludendorff, Major General.
I am 19, have a little daughter, and am lying in a clinic in Munich. Suddenly I hear music, singing, shouting, a distant disturbing noise from the streets. The night nurse comes and turns on the blue light. Sister Maria, what's going on outside? Maria answers, that nice Mr. Hitler, who visited you, has become Chancellor. We put his roses very close to the Madonna in the baptistry. Mother Superior prays for him. We all pray for him and for Germany. Henrietta von Schirach, wife of Baldur von Schirach.
Diary, Tuesday, January 31st, 1933. In Berlin, there was a lot of cheering during the night. The crowd moved past Hindenburg for 3.5 hours. A huge torchlight procession. Henrietta Schneider.
This Dr. Goebbels is a wizard, Hitler said to me. Where did he get so many torches in such a short time? Heinrich Hoffmann, photographer.
A fragment of film developed with an early AGFA colour film process. It shows thousands of extras recreating the torchlight procession through the Brandenburg Gate. It's supposed to remind viewers of January the 30th, 1933. Hitler doesn't seize power, nor is it transferred to him. Hitler obtains sole power through lies and continued broken promises to other parties. He swears to uphold the Weimar Constitution and to comply with the Articles. He deceives the mighty German president, the elites who are now collaborating with him, the voters, and the world community.
Our fanatical belief in victory had to wear down our opponents over time. We marched triumphantly through the Brandenburg Gate and will one day go down in history as the pioneers and heralds of a new, better era. Gustav Heinz, Berlin essay man.
That the Nazis are enemies for everything dear to me, I was not for a moment mistaken about that. Where I was completely mistaken was how terrible an enemy they would become. Sebastian Hafner, journalist, Memoirs.
Radio address, February the 1st, 1933. Now, German nation, give us 4 years, then you can judge and sentence us.
Adolf Hitler, Reich Chancellor.
Diary, Friday, February the 3rd, 1933. Red terror is everywhere. You can't get used to Hitler. Henrietta Schneider.
The majority of his ministers were members of the German National People's Party. He utterly despised the party and was convinced that he would one day be able to rid himself of them. To be able to carry this out, he set one condition to which the German president also agreed. He wanted the power to order new elections. Ernst Niekisch.
The election campaign was horrible. Hitler worked harder than before or at any time in the future. He knew that he needed a majority in the new assembly once and for all. The big speech in the Sportpalast on the radio was the high point of the campaign. It was ghastly. Golo Mann, Memoirs and Thoughts.
Speech in the Berlin Sportpalast, February the 10th, 1933. I cannot divest myself of my faith in my people and stand firmly by the conviction that the hour will come at last when the millions who curse us today will stand by us and with us will hail the new, hard-won and painfully acquired German nation that we have created together. The new German Reich of greatness and power and glory and justice. Amen. Adolf Hitler, Reich Chancellor.
Diary, Wednesday, March the 1st, 1933. It was announced on the radio yesterday that the Reichstag building was on fire. A Dutch communist has confessed. Henrietta Schneider.
At first, I didn't think that it was the communists either. But later, when I met the men who must have known, I never managed to find out who was really behind this. Fritz Wiedemann, war comrade, later adjutant to Adolf Hitler.
Edgar, schläfst du früh?
I had decided to finish my last film, The Burning Secret, from a book by Stefan Zweig, and then go to France. The premiere of the film had the misfortune of being on the same day as the Reichstag fire. Everyone in Berlin was laughing about this coincidence. I had to leave because the SA was after me. Robert Seeltmack, German Jewish film director.
Mutti, Mutti.
On Saturday, March the 4th, 1933, the Führer's aircraft Richthofen lands at Devaux Airport in Königsberg. Winter still has East Prussia in its grip. Despite the bitter cold, the SA have mustered for the reception. The Chancellor, Adolf Hitler, will give a speech in Königsberg today and is accompanied by a large entourage, including a Hohenzollern prince. August Wilhelm, known as Auvi, is the fourth eldest son of the exiled emperor and an ardent Hitler supporter. Hitler's speech is broadcast on all stations. This coming Sunday is the Reichstag election. The Reichstag elections of March the 5th are the last more or less free elections in the German Reich. On the streets, dissidents are terrorized by the SA.
Diary, Leipzig, March the 5th, 1933. In the evening with father to Auerbach's Keller restaurant to hear the election results. The National Socialists are still far from an absolute majority. Together with the traitors of the Black-White-Red Party Alliance, at 51.8%, they have a slight majority. Erich Ebermeier, writer.
The terror that was felt everywhere interfered, of course, with free elections, but it influenced the results only slightly. Mannes Sperber, member of the Communist Party KPD.
In the elections, the NSDAP profits from the high turnout of 88.8%, gaining 43.9%. It has to form a coalition with the German National People's Party. The additional votes come mostly from former non-voters. The NSDAP also profits where it is already strong, among young Protestant voters, farmers and farm workers, the self-employed, civil servants, and the lower middle class. In the industrial segment, where the workers are often organized in unions, there is again no decisive breakthrough for the NSDAP. But on March the 5th, 1933, probably 1/3 of the workers vote for the Nazis.
Diary, March the 6th, 1933. Monday. The Nazis and the National People's Party do not have the 2/3 majority necessary to change the constitution. Graf Kessler, publicist and diplomat.
But the majority of Germans don't want a parliamentary democracy either. The democratic parties remain clearly in the minority, because 12.3% of the voters cast their votes for the communists.
The political parties, including the Social Democrats and the unions, haven't shown any overwhelming evidence of prudence and courage in recent weeks. Paul Löbe, Social Democrat, Vice President of the German Parliament.
Diary, March the 10th, 1933. Every day the newspapers have new reports on Hitler's rise to power. The higher-up civil servants are losing their cushy positions, much to our delight. Germany is being swept clean. The communists will soon have disappeared from sight. That is Hitler's goal. Henrietta Schneider.
After the elections, the weather suddenly turned mild. The porter's wife called it Hitler weather. The street itself, like all others, was hung with black, white and red swastika flags. It was unwise not to display them. Christopher Isherwood, British writer.
March the 12th, 1933. Press dispatch. The office of the Reichstag sent the newly elected members an invitation to the opening session. According to a directive, the communist members of the assembly were not sent an invitation. Vossische Zeitung newspaper.
Diary, Tuesday, March the 21st, 1933. Around 12, on the radio, we heard the celebrations for the opening of the Reichstag and the Garrison Church in Potsdam. You have to say they really know how to do pomp and propaganda. Karl Windschild, retired pastor.
Company followed company. The city of Potsdam stood like an iron fortress in army grey from the Old Market to the Garrison Church. Across from us were the SA, the SS, and the Stahlhelm, the League of Front Soldiers. The Reich government walked with measured steps past the Guard of Honor to the Garrison Church. Chancellor Adolf Hitler led the way, followed by Vice Chancellor von Papen. After the president had passed the honor guard, the government and the new parliamentarians, with the exception of the communists and social democrats, entered the Garrison Church. Wilhelm Ernst Bierstedt, Grenadier, First Class, report.
In Munich, we listened to events on the radio. Potsdam, a well-disguised fraud with the aim of doing the conservatives a favor with no basis in reality. Hitler in frock coat and top hat, mild as never before or since. The voice of Hindenburg dull, as if from the grave. The Prussian sense of duty means patriotism and the fear of God. And a clear majority in Parliament once again, strictly in the spirit of the Constitution on which he took his oath. It was his last speech of significance and, without knowing it, his abdication. Now he was no longer needed. Goloman, student.
Diary, March the 25th, 1933. The Reichstag session the day before yesterday must have been terrible. The representatives had to walk through a regiment of SA people flanking the path to the chamber, a most unpleasant gauntlet. Bella Fromm, German Jewish journalist.
2 days later, I was sitting in the Kroll Opera House. Not as a Reichstag deputy, I was an observer, and on March the 23rd, 1933, I witnessed the Reichstag session in which the Enabling Act was passed by 441 votes to 94. Arthur Axmann, member of the leadership of the Hitler Youth.
Und der sich mit ihm verbrüdenden anderen Organisationen ändert dies nichts.
The debate in the Reichstag should have begun with a sharply worded protest against this blatant breach of the Constitution, through which more than 80 fully legitimate communist members of the Reichstag were excluded. All parties remained silent, including the Social Democrats, who accepted this constitutional breach. The Social Democrats did at least reject the Enabling Act, in contrast to the Centre Party, the Bavarian People's Party, and the State Party. Ludwig Quidde, German Nobel Peace Prize laureate, 1927.
With the so-called Enabling Act, Hitler demands extraordinary powers for himself and his government, thus paving the way for a dictatorship.
Otto Wels's speech was a masterpiece of style and content, a final farewell to the faded era of humanity. Wilhelm Högner, SPD Member of Parliament, Memoirs.
The Social Democrats were the only members to vote against the Enabling Act. But despite my conviction that the Social Democrats had failed, I was not unimpressed by Wels' speech. Arthur Axmann.
Article 1 of the Act describes the transfer of legislative powers from Parliament to the Cabinet. The legislative and executive branches become one. Parliament has virtually abolished itself.
Meine Herren, seit dem 30. Januar hat sich in Deutschland eine Umwälzung vollzogen, die in unserer Geschichte einst mit Recht als die nationale Revolution bezeichnet werden wird. Dass ein solcher geschichtlicher Vorgang wie jede Kampfhandlung hier und da auch von bedauerlichen Erscheinungen begleitet ist, liegt auf der Hand.
He overrode the Constitution with the Constitution, and thus won the fight for unlimited power in the first and decisive round. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Finance Minister.
The present state of affairs in Germany causes me to resign my position in the Prussian Academy of Sciences. I know how deeply I'm indebted to it. The dependency of my position on the Prussian government is intolerable under the present circumstances. With respect, Albert Einstein.
10 months later, he was in exile, his property seized by Hitler's new regime. Germany's loss, America's gain.
Report of statement by Hermann Göring to members of the foreign press on March the 25th, 1933. There was no one in Germany who had had even a fingernail cut off. He didn't deny that several thousand communist functionaries had been arrested, but they were treated exactly the same as other prisoners. There had also been cases where Jews had been arrested and beaten. The minister explained.
The government and I will never tolerate that someone is persecuted just because he is Jewish.
Deutsche Allgemeine Zeitung, newspaper, March the 26th, 1933.
Diary, March the 31st, 1933. On the radio, Göring has announced the boycott of the Jews. It is scheduled for tomorrow. Bella Fromm.
At each entrance stood 2 or 3 uniformed SA soldiers, who weren't aggressive, but merely reminded those shopping that this was a Jewish business. Christopher Isherwood.
Diary, Leipzig, April the 1st, 1933. When entering the store, the SA man says in a polite, disciplined tone, "Jewish business." We, just as polite and disciplined. "Thank you, we know." Eric Aberman, author.
Diary. Wrocław, Saturday, April the 1st, 1933. In all Jewish shops, one sees the windows painted with white letters about 50 to 80 centimeters high. Jew. Glued next to them, or in the process of being stuck on, are little red slips of paper. Germans do not buy from Jews. Walter Tausk, German of Jewish descent, murdered 1940.
A certain murmur of disapproval, suppressed but audible, ran through the country. The Nazis realized that the step they had just taken was too large. And after April the 1st, they canceled some of the measures, but not without first allowing their full force to be felt. Sebastian Hafner, author, Memoirs.
Not January the 30th, the day of the seizure of power, not the day of the gathering in Potsdam, March the 23rd, 1933, but April the 1st of this year is the great turning point. It was the clear, unmistakable demonstration that the rule of law was over. The rule of law was replaced by naked tyranny. Paul Ronge, lawyer, Königsberg.
Diary, April the 1st, 1933. Difficult times. Adolf Hitler will master them. May he succeed. Henriette Schneider, Elk, East Prussia.
In Berlin, wie in anderen Universitätsstädten Deutschlands,
A
wurden
nationwide
undeutsche und
campaign
unsittliche
is
Bücher von den
directed at the
Studenten
non-German
eingesammelt und
spirit,
öffentlich
that is to
verbrannt.
say Jews and other
Der
supposedly
Scheiterhaufen auf dem
hostile
Opernplatz in
elements.
Berlin.
On May the 10th, 1933, undesirable books are publicly burnt on Berlin's Opernplatz, opposite the Friedrich Wilhelm University.
Reichsminister Dr. Goebbels spricht zur Jugend.
Meine Kommilitonen, deutsche Männer und Frauen, das Zeitalter eines überspitzten jüdischen Intellektualismus ist nun zu Ende. Und der Durchbruch der deutschen Revolution hat auf dem deutschen Weg wieder die Gasse freigemacht. Und der kommende deutsche Mensch wird nicht nur ein Mensch des Buches, sondern auch ein Mensch des Charakters sein.
Among the authors whose works are thrown onto a large pyre by Berlin students are the German Jews Theodor Wolff and Emil Ludwig, but also the atheists Karl Marx and Karl Kautsky, along with Sigmund Freud and Erich Maria Remarque, Kurt Tucholsky, Karl von Ossietzky and Erich Kästner.
In 1933, my books were burnt with somber, solemn pomp by a certain Mr. Goebbels in Berlin. He triumphantly called out the names of 24 German writers who were to be symbolically eliminated forever. I was the only one of the 24 who had come in person to witness this theatrical impudence. I stood in front of the university, wedged in among students in SA uniform, the pride of the nation, watching our books fly into the twitching flames and listening to the cunning little liars' schmaltzy tirades. Erich Kästner, author.
It is a strange thought that the essence of a single man can redirect and convert an entire society like a magnet directed at a pile of pieces of metal. Karen Blixen, Danish writer.
Anyone who did not fight against the Hitler state effectively served it. Esther, Countess of Schwerin, East Prussian landowner.
I, as a natural coward and endowed with an excruciating imagination, kept my mouth shut. Marie Louisa Kaschnitz, writer, notes.
People cling to life. You could certainly go along with it, but you could also keep a low profile and become invisible. Order Schäfer, writer.
Letter from prison, June the 7th, 1933. You know that imprisonment doesn't depress me at all. What could I really do outside at the moment? Shrug off the sad looks of the workers with a humiliated heart and sagging shoulders, and tell them that I cannot change it either? It's better to be outwardly unfree, and inwardly face the future with a proud soul. Julius Leber, SPD member of the Reichstag.
The first improvised concentration camps are run by the SA and are then taken over by Himmler's SS, thus creating the SS state.
There were concentration camps in Germany at the time, including one in Oranienburg. It's true that Hermann Göring set up the first when he was head of the Prussian police. They weren't intended for Jews, however, but for the communist enemies of the state. Emmy Göring, née Sonnemann, actress.
When Himmler requested that I join the active SS, the guard troops of a concentration camp, I had not thought about concentration camps. The term was too strange for me. I had no concept of what it was. Rudolf Höss, member of the SS.
People abroad often ignored the fact that concentration camps had first been set up for Germans opposed to the Nazis, many thousands of whom died there before any foreign countries were occupied. Willy Brandt, German-Norwegian refugee in exile in Sweden.
National Socialism is nothing new. Just the faithful, old, supportive, noble German manner, which has been buried for years and has been brought back to life by our Führer. Maria Engelhardt, NSDAP member, Duisburg.
That's why I want to pray to God on my knees every day, that Hitler, who we need so much today, stays healthy for many years. Wilhelm Meyer, NSDAP member, Kaiserslautern.
Sooner or later, that was our firm will. The party political state was to be destroyed. A nation ruled by 35 parties had to one day collapse as a result of the friction between the interest groups. Gerhard Ulein, NSDAP member, Tilsit, East Prussia.
Diary, June the 25th, 1933. The Stahlhelm organization is subordinated to the NSDAP. The German National Party office is occupied. The German nationalist combat groups and numerous associations have been dissolved. The Christian workers' trade unions have been called enemies of the state and dissolved. A state commissioner has been appointed for the Protestant Church. A number of leading social democrats have been placed in protective custody, among them former Reichstag President Löbe. Kurt F. Rosenberg, German Jewish lawyer, Hamburg.
On June the 22nd, 1933, the NSDAP Reich Interior Minister, Wilhelm Frick, declares the Social Democratic Party a subversive party and an enemy of the people, which results in its dissolution. With the arrest of 2,000 officials by the Bavarian political police led by Himmler, the end of June sees the demise of the Catholic Bavarian People's Party, which is dissolved on July the 4th. 1 day later, the Centre Party, the last remaining political party besides the NSDAP, is banned. On June the 14th, 1933, the law against the formation of new parties ensures that the NSDAP remains the only authorized political party in Germany.
Diary, Paris, July the 6th, 1933, Thursday. To guard a list from where Countess Kaiserin left for Germany. Her husband Hermann spoke very interestingly about the Nazis and Hitler. Hitler, whom he studied carefully, is somebody who seeks death and thus embodies a fundamental characteristic of the German people. Harry Graf Kessler.
Pageant in Schwelm in May 1939. The Germans are still daring enough to put on a parody of the Führer.
As long as the jokes were good, he once said, that meant that the man was still popular. Wilhelm Krause, personal assistant to Hitler.
He had such a natural sense of humour and was full of genuine happiness and warmth in those years. Emmy Göring.
As an artist, I was able to get to know him privately. Good-natured, with a sense of fun, receptive to harmless jokes from others, himself humorous, and with a lot of self-irony. Albert Speer, the Kranzberg Protocol.
Anyone who says afterwards that Hitler had no sense of humor simply didn't know him. Hitler had wit and a sense of humor and could laugh out loud. Hartmann Lauterbacher, provincial NSDAP leader.
Hitler's laughter always had a touch of scorn and sarcasm. It revealed traces of past disappointments and suppressed ambitions. Paul Otto Schmidt, interpreter for Adolf Hitler.
During the party convention, I had seen him laugh heartily at least a dozen times. He would throw back his head so that a lock of hair fell over his left temple down over his eye. Still laughing, he would shake it out of his face with a jerk of his head, or he would push it back with his hand. William Shirer, U.S. newspaper correspondent to Berlin.
Diary, Wednesday, August the 30th, 1933. In the evening, I listened to Hitler's magnificent reception in Nuremberg. Speeches, fanfares, singing, all broadcast perfectly. How must this simple musketeer of the World War feel now? He remains the simple man of the people. Henriette Schneider.
The first Nazi rally film, Victory of Faith, is produced by the director Leni Riefenstahl on just a small budget.
When I watched the film at the cinema, I was anything but happy. What was happening on the screen for me was just an incomplete patchwork, not a film. But it seemed to please the audience, perhaps because it was more interesting than the usual newsreels. I certainly did not watch it a second time. Hitler and the party bigwigs were also thrilled by this film, that only runs for an hour. Leni Riefenstahl, director and actress.
What was new in Nazi Germany was that Hitler's fascism used all the possible forms of a reign of terror and human liquidation with utter ruthlessness, increasing technical perfection, and German thoroughness. For the first time, the politically uniform mass media of a whole country, including the new media, radio, and sound film, were unashamedly used to serve a murderous, anti-communist witch hunt. Erich Honecker, Communist Party official in the Saarland, from my life.
Whether the Germans are a mystical people is debatable. Either way, you can't deny that they are currently undergoing a phase of messianism. Besides, there is also a kind of cultish tendency towards symbolism, undoubtedly a rather degenerate form of mysticism. Flags, badges, uniforms, dueling scars, Führer, Wagner, swastika, golden braids, all of these are symbols. Antoni Graf-Sobański, Polish writer and essayist.
Campaigning in a working-class district in Hamburg-Altona, the NSDAP are courting the workers in particular. On November the 12th, 1933, Hitler calls new elections for the Reichstag. Only candidates from one single list are admitted, which is advertised with the slogan, "With Hitler against the armaments madness." The new Reichstag has 661 members and no women or Jews. Only 22 members are not from the NSDAP.
Up until 1934, the Communist and Social Democratic parties were still a power. On November the 12th, 1933, on just one street, Rheinische Straße in Dortmund, 2,000 voted no. Hitler had linked this Reichstag election with a referendum on the withdrawal from the League of Nations. Anyone who came to the polling stations received a yes pin, which was intended to exert psychological pressure on the voters. Nevertheless, more than 2 million Germans didn't take part in the election, and over 3 million voted no. Erich Honecker.
The best-selling books in Germany at the time of National Socialism were: 5th place, Alfred Rosenberg, The Myth of the 20th Century, an assessment of the spiritual and intellectual confrontation of our time, 335,000 copies. 4th place, Philip Buhler, The Fight for Germany, a reader for German youth, 950,000 copies. 3rd place, the Cigarette Card album Germany Awakens, Development, Struggle and Victory of the NSDAP, 1,175,000 copies. 2nd place, I'm Still Laughing About It, Soldiers Tell Funny Stories, 2,600,000 copies. 1st place, Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf, 12,450,000 copies. At the Nuremberg Victory Rally in early September 1933, SA Chief of Staff Ernst Roehm is the most prominent party leader after Hitler and clearly his right-hand man. In public, Roehm shows his loyalty to Hitler. Privately, however, he criticizes him severely for his policy on the German army. Thanks to his instinct for power, Hitler is willing to believe the rumors, spread by opponents of the powerful head of the SA, that the leaders of the SA, with its 4 million members, are planning a coup.
Perfect Caesarism is dictatorship. Not dictatorship by a party, but by one man who is against all parties, especially his own. Every revolutionary movement achieves victory with the vanguard of Praetorian guards, who are then no longer needed and are merely dangerous. Oswald Spengler, nationalist German historical philosopher.
During the first half of 1934, I had repeated meetings with Hitler regarding the financing of the SA. Roehm took regular part in the talks. Although the discussions between Hitler and Roehm were carried out as between old comrades, you could detect tension in the background. Lutz Graf Schwerin von Krosigk, Minister of Finance.
Diary, Berlin, June the 24th, 1934. Politically, it stinks. Nobody knows why exactly. A power struggle is impending between the SA and the SS. Erich Ebermeier.
When Dietrich Eckart died in 1923, just 4 men were left who addressed Hitler with the familiar du form: Esser, Weber, Streicher and Roehm. Albert Speer, Memoirs.
The differences of opinion between Roehm and Hitler, especially concerning the issue of the German army, escalate. Before the SA leadership, Roehm finally calls for the German army to be included in his command.
According to Hitler, Roehm was an anarchist who wanted power at any price. Neither the ideals of the National Socialists nor the thought of a new system of government determined his actions, but only the desire to get control of the German army. Christa Schröder, Hitler's private secretary.
The so-called Röhm Revolt, the Night of the Long Knives, was really an act by Goebbels and Göring to get rid of uncomfortable accessories and dangerous rivals. Theophil Wurm, Archbishop of the Evangelical Church in Württemberg.
Diary, Sunday, July the 1st, 1934. Mutiny of the SA leaders in Munich, with Röhm at its head. Hitler himself helped arrest the gang and had them shot. Henrietta Schneider.
Bit by bit, the news of what was happening trickled through until late that evening a full official account was issued. Ernst Roehm, said the communiqué, and some of his fellow stormtroop leaders had been caught plotting a putsch to seize power. Hitler and Göring had uncovered the plot and crushed it. Sefton Delmer, correspondent of the Daily Express in Berlin.
The violence of the Night of the Long Knives is carried out by the SS on orders from Hitler and Göring. The Lieutenant General of the SS, Sepp Dietrich, receives weapons from the German army for his bodyguard unit, Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, to carry out a secret and very important assignment for the Führer.
June the 30th, 1934. Prison Munich Stadelheim. There were terrible hours once I arrived in the office. Sepp Dietrich and Prince Waldeck came into my room in SS uniform and said they had orders to shoot the SA leadership at once. The Führer had sent him a list of 110 SA leaders who were suspects. I said this was absolutely out of the question. Dietrich called Hess and reported my refusal to him. Then he gave me the phone and said, "The Führer wants to talk to you."
You refuse to obey my order? I will eradicate these boys with rods and sticks.
Suddenly, Hess came on the phone. I pointed out to Hess that most of the SA leaders did not give the impression of having been hauled away from an armed putsch attempt. The firing squads informed me that it was already dark, and that would make it very difficult to shoot. I sat and waited and smoked. Finally, the phone rang. Hess told me the main culprits are to be shot. Then I asked him, which ones? I had the list in my hand and heard him say 19 names. Röhm was not on the list. Hans Frank, Bavarian Minister of Justice.
On July the 2nd, Hitler announces the official end of the purge in which between 150 and 200 people were shot.
Röhm was one of the last victims. He was shot on July the 2nd, 1934. Hans Frank.
Diary, July the 13th, 1934. In the evening, a major speech by Hitler. To Germany and foreign countries, he justified his actions of June the 30th against the traitors. We are proud of our Führer. May God preserve him. Henrietta Schneider.
Mutiny is broken by means of the same inviolable principles. If someone accuses me of not having brought in the ordinary courts for judgment, I can only say, at this hour, I was responsible for the fate of the German nation, and thus the German people's supreme judge.
To crush the alleged revolt by Röhm, Adolf Hitler uses the services of the SS, whose leaders have already brought the police almost entirely under their command. The SS, which was formerly still affiliated with the SA, is rewarded for its murderous service. On July the 20th, 1934, Hitler decrees,
"In view of the great services of the SS, particularly in connection with the occurrences of June the 30th, 1934, I hereby promote them to a self-contained organization within the NSDAP."
Adolf Hitler.
With that, Hitler has forged the decisive weapon of his state. The SA becomes a kind of folklore club for the NSDAP.
Hitler swore that only 77 people had been executed. It had been unavoidable that some were shot by accident. Like a certain Willi Schmidt in Munich, for example, the SS were in a hurry to shoot the first Willi Schmidt they could find, without court proceedings. You have to consider how many Willi Schmidts there were in Munich. Friedlin Wagner at boarding school.